Usually you would use pre-nail to build the momentum, and in this case here we're doing DIY frames to keep the momentum. So believe it or not, we do listen to the comments, we read them. So Chad Carroll asks, I'm going to be a homeowner building my next house here in Hamilton. If I was to not use pre-nail and build everything myself, are the cost savings significant? I know it's a piece of string question, but appreciate your opinion. Cheers, Chad. I think the first thing you've got to establish is what is your priority. We as a company take houses from bare land all the way through to code of compliance and landscaping. So frames is one aspect of that. It's a crucial part, but it's one aspect of that. We have built our own frames from scratch, and I learned that in my apprenticeship, but we usually use pre-nail. So if you've never heard the term pre-nail before, pre-nail means frames that are pre-made, pre-nailed together in a framing factory. So they can do a house a day, it's an efficient way, they're set up, they've got jigs and tables and rollers and guns. They've even got a saw that cuts angles and lengths automatically. So obviously we don't have any of that gear on site. That doesn't mean that you can't build your own frames. I'm going to give you a couple of questions to ask yourself if you're weighing up, should I go pre-nail, should I build my own? So question number one, you got to think about your time, and you got to put a value on your time. How much do you value your time? This is not a trick question. Can you go and earn $100 an hour being a computer programmer? And if so, it's probably more beneficial for you to do a week of computer programming and then send all that money over to the pre-nailer and let the pre-nailer do what they do best and you do best. There is examples though where you might be on a year off, like I was, and part of your sabbatical is to get hands-on and get involved, and you really enjoy the process. And so you then value your time differently, because it's not just about how much money you could earn or how much you're spending, but how much your time is gaining by putting it into doing the framing yourself. If you've got a really tight deadline for the project, I wouldn't recommend spending 2 or 3 weeks building frames from scratch. I would recommend getting pre-nail in and standing them, because you can't beat that initial burst of like, wow, there's my house, it's up, it's ready to go. So one thing to note is you need to make the decision reasonably early on. Right now, our pre-nail factories are booked till the end of the year, and we're usually booking 4 to 6 months in advance. So there have been circumstances for us, for smaller, simpler houses, we've decided to build the frames from scratch ourselves to keep the momentum of the project going. Now that's quite ironic. Usually you would use pre-nail to build the momentum, and in this case here we're doing DIY frames to keep the momentum. So again, it's very circumstantial, and it's all about your time and how you value your time in the scheme of the bigger picture. Timber versus time in a pre-nail quote is probably about half and half. Now, it could be 60-40 one way or the other, but at least half of the pre-nail bill is going to be raw materials. And now also remembering that you won't be getting as good of a rate on timber as the pre-nail factory, who's buying stacks and stacks of it all the time. You've got to also remember it's things like nails and nail plates and hardware. All of that stuff adds up really, really quick. If you're going to do it yourself, you're going to want to have a decent saw table set up. You're going to want to have a nail gun for sure, 2 if there's 2 of you working, and it's going to need to be something like a Hilti that can handle continuous shooting all day long. I reckon when you start to add those things in, the time saving of a pre-nail quote starts to end up around 30 to 40%. For example, for me, with the section Nobody Wanted, I never thought of building my own frames. So I did a lot of things hands-on from the ground up. Why did I not do my own frames? Because I valued my time. My time was better spent progressing the build in other areas. So when I built this house, I put an hourly rate on my time as if I was going to work for someone else. What could my time get? And it's very important that you keep that in perspective. Whatever you could go and earn working for someone else is your baseline for your time. And so if you're doing it for the first time and there's 2 of you, it'll probably take you about a week. So give or take 80 to 100 hours, then put a value on those 80 to 100 hours. So then work out the materials, and a real easy way to do that is just minimum, you've got 4 rows, you've got bottom plate, dwang, dwang, top plate, 5 rows, perimeter, everywhere there's a frame you've got 5 rows, and then you're going to have a stud at least every 600, and then times that by something by like 1.25. That's a real quick, crude way to work out your timber bill, work out your time, your timber bill, and then compare that to the pre-nail quote you're getting. Now, if it's thousands of dollars cheaper, and if you really want to learn and you want the satisfaction of saying, I did that, give it a crack. For me personally, I didn't really need to get a kick out of saying I built my own frames. In fact, I wanted to utilize their expertise, their programming. So that's another really important thing to think about. What style of build are you building, and who's doing the plans, and who's producing the PS1 or the producer's statement for the build consent documents. If you're doing a traditional build, you're going to have truss ceilings, and you're going to need them done in a factory anyway, and they're going to need to do a statement for that, so it makes sense to get them to do the framing statement rather than the designer. Doesn't mean the designer can't do it. This is like, we're going right down the rabbit hole right now. For me personally, I think pre-nail is where it's at. We use it on the majority of our builds, 80% plus. It turns up, it's ready to go. It gives the job a huge motivational kick. It allows the factory to specialize and use their gear, equipment, factory setup and specialize in that, and it allows us to use our expertise in other areas on site. Ultimately, I think pre-nail is a good option. And I think, Chad, your time is probably better spent in other aspects of the build. I hope this video has helped. If you've got a curly question, comment below. I know you've already subscribed, and if not, you shouldn't be watching this far into the video without doing that.